I would like to introduce to a few of you, because I'm sure most of you know who this guy is. Tonight, we have the privilege of listening to Nathan Hoag. Yeah, you can come up. Phil, stand up also. Well, because I'm sure many of them don't know you as well. Phil is also the pastor of Sacred Grace TNL, and he is here. You'll get to hear from Phil next week. This is Nathan, the pastor of the Sacred Grace Inglewood. Let's give Nathan both an Inglewood and an East Colfax welcome.
Sorry, I'm going to take this out of here, if that's okay, so I can walk around a little bit. Hey, everybody, great to be with you tonight. Thank you, East Colfax, for your lovely hospitality. We feel very warmly welcomed, so thanks for letting us come and take over and be a part of this thing with you. This has been really neat to see how you do things. This is a special opportunity on a number of levels. Not only do we get to see the way that you worship, and we get to see the comparisons and contrasts of the way that you do things and the way that we do things, but I've known Joe for a really long time. I've known Joe longer than I've known my wife, in fact. And so for a long time, Joe and I have had a lot of conversations about church and what it is and how to do it. How does one church? We've asked that question a lot. How does it play out in real life? What's the right way? What's the wrong way? And we've always been doing that, but in very different contexts from each other. And so to be able to do this right now in this particular season of life, although in very different areas, but the same way with the same family of churches is a really cool thing. So this is really special to be able to kind of collide our two communities and be together here tonight. If you're from Inglewood in the room and you're trying to kind of get your head around this whole thing, just to give you a little bit of geographic orientation, as Joe said, we've got Stapleton and Aurora. 25th here is kind of like Clarkson in our neighborhood, okay? So on one side of Clarkson, you have Cherry Hills Village. On the other side of Clarkson, you have Inglewood, okay? So really similar disparities in wealth, really similar disparities in lifestyle, very similar disparities in diversity, that kind of thing. So to give you an idea of kind of where we sit, that's really what neighborhood we're in. Tonight, I'm going to jump kind of right back into our Epiphany series. We've been, throughout the season of Epiphany, responding to questions that many of you have submitted. So you've submitted questions via a variety of different avenues, and the questions have been great, and some of them have been real zingers. And we've talked about all kinds of different things throughout this season. We've talked about what the Bible is and how to handle conflict and challenges and differences of opinion. We've talked about Jesus and sexuality. We've talked about Jesus and women. We've talked about Jesus and politics. We've kind of figured out how does the Bible or how does Christianity sort of cross some of these things that seem culturally challenging to us. So we've talked a little bit about those things throughout this series. It's been really, really fun. I've had a blast. I don't know about you, but it's been really great. Tonight we're going to continue on in that series, and we're actually going to answer one of the first questions that was submitted when we opened these things up. And it's like one of my favorite questions. You're going to see why in just a second. I absolutely love this question for a number of reasons, as you'll be able to tell. The question that we're going to answer tonight is, what is a parish church? Somebody just lobbed that up for me. I don't know who it was, but thank you very much. I love talking about this, as many of you know, the idea of parish, the concept of church. But I'm going to broaden it a bit tonight, and we're going to talk a little bit about something that theologians and seminarians call ecclesiology. We're going to talk a little bit about the study of what is the church. How do we practice church? What does the church mean to us, and how do we do it in 2020? What does it look like here and now? I'm going to go through the same structure that I've gone through it throughout this entire series, so just to orient you to it a little bit. I'm going to ask 3 questions in response to this one question: what, why, and how. What is the current cultural moment concerning this topic? How does it matter, why does it matter to Christians, and is there any biblical precedent? And how can we develop a posture and practice towards this topic? That's the structure of what we're going to go through tonight. So I'm going to jump right into what is the current cultural moment on ecclesiology in the United States of America. There's been a significant decline in the last decade, both in those who identify as Christians and those who attend church regularly. This may be no surprise to you, but this is becoming more and more apparent and more real. Although spirituality of various kinds seem to be surging in our communities around us over the past 10 years, spiritual practices in a specifically Christian context have been on a significant decline. Roxanne Stone from Barna Research says this: while tens of millions of Americans attend church each week, the practice has declined in recent years. According to the Barna Group's 2014 tracking data, overall church attendance has dipped from 43% in 2004 to 36% today. But beyond a dip in attendance, numbers, the nature of church-going is changing. This is interesting. Regular attenders used to be people who went to church 3 or more weekends each month, or even several times a week. Now, people who show up once every 4 to 6 weeks consider themselves regular churchgoers. Many pastors and church leaders are accounting for sporadic attendance in their ministry planning. This is becoming apparent and true. If you've been a part of a church for any length of time, you know that you kind of cross paths with people on some sort of an irregular basis. You know that church has kind of become something that you do maybe when it's most convenient, maybe when even when it feels like a rhythm, it's probably not every single week for you. That's becoming more and more normal. The group that seems to be growing the most in our country, in contrast to a shrinking Christianity, is what Pew Research refers to as nothing in particular. This group is referred to oftentimes as the nuns. That's N-O-N-E-S, not N-U-N-S. These nuns, these non-religiously affiliated people, are simply finding that church is not the place for them. And I want to recognize that some of those people that would identify as nuns have found their way to our churches, which is really exciting. And they're exploring faith and considering faith maybe afresh and anew because it seems like a place where they can do that kind of thing. This growing population in our society has a few particular reasons for not wanting to be affiliated with Christianity. And Barna Research has identified 5 primary reasons for this, okay? So here's the first one. The church is irrelevant, the leaders are hypocritical, and leaders have experienced too much moral failure. Somehow that's 1, even though it's really 3. God is missing in the church. 3, legitimate doubt is prohibited. 4, there's no learning about God. And 5, they're not finding any community. My guess is 1, at least, of these things resonates with you in some way. Maybe in a past life, like maybe a few years ago, you were like, yeah, this was one of the reasons why I was going to leave, or I wasn't so sure if I was going to stick around. Maybe in the future, you'll wrestle with one of these things. Maybe right now, you're wrestling with one of these things and trying to figure out how you'll engage the church. The truth is, the church is an uncomfortable place, right? There's very few venues like it in the world anymore, where you gather together for a live teaching and some live music, and you're participating in the whole thing, and you're sitting close enough to people to like interact with them, and you have to take different breaks at different times to talk to somebody, and you see them beforehand, and you see them afterwards. These might be people you run into at the grocery store or at a table group. I mean, this is a very unique thing, and it's strange, really. And it comes along with a lot of discomfort. Jamar Tisby, in his podcast, Pass the Mic, which if you're not listening to it, you need to be listening to it, says we've got to get comfortable with tension in the church. And he says that regularly. It's like kind of a mantra. Like, we've got to get comfortable with this thing. Basically, what he's saying there is that it's not going away. Another way to put this is we need to become comfortable with discomfort. Because there are a lot of things about church and Christianity that make us uncomfortable, and our knee-jerk reaction is to pack our bags and take our ball and go home, right? That's kind of what we do when we get uncomfortable. John Perkins says this about church and Christianity. Our natural preference is to stay home, comfortable in our own spirituality. God calls us each on a journey, a spiritual journey of the heart. It will mean leaving the familiar, traveling in discomfort, but being pushed to place our trust in God for everything. Practicing the way of Jesus together requires attachment to the institutional church in some form. That's basically what we have right now. That isn't to say that you can't practice Christianity any other way, but the primary way that we do that is this, what you're doing right now. And it comes with discomforts, and it comes with challenges. But I want to zoom in just a little bit, and I want to talk just for a minute about the ecclesiology of all of you. I have to make some assumptions here about the East Colfax folks because I don't know you as well, but at least this is true for Inglewood. A lot of people in our family of churches are looking for a way to pursue God through Jesus using a different methodology than their parents. If we really get honest about what we want in church and what we like in church, we're just trying to find something different than what our parents did. And that's true for every generation. That's not like a millennial thing where we're just trying to rebel and create anarchy so that we can be different and cool and you know, like think outside the box. That's true for every generation. I think all of us are just trying to find a way to practice church, to practice Christianity, using a different methodology than our parents. There are a lot of people in our family of churches who have been burned, abused, hurt, and rejected by traditional Christianity. And frankly, I am blown away by the courage that you have to muster every single week to be a part of this thing. Like, you have guts that I would hope to have if I were in a similar situation. I can't believe being hurt by something so deeply and then continuing to come back to that thing and hoping that maybe you'll get it right this time or they'll get it right this time. That's an incredible act of bravery, and I respect it so much. The truth is, many of you are on your way out, and you've chosen the Sacred Grace in one form or another to be your last stop along the way. And to be honest with you, I hope it is your last stop along the way, and I hope you stay. I hope it's your last stop along the way, and you put down roots here, and you find that this is a place where you can bear the discomfort and the challenges that come along with being a church, and that those 5 things that we listed up there that turn so many people away actually become maybe reasons why you stay, reasons why you're willing to dig in, and reasons why you're willing to make this place home. Let's take just a minute here to take a look at that passage that we read in the beginning of Matthew chapter 16. We're not going to talk about all the ins and outs of it. We're not going to talk about where and what the heck Caesarea Philippi is. We're not going to talk about whether or not Hades actually has gates. We're not going to talk about whether or not the keys to the kingdom are actually keys. We're not going to talk about that kind of thing. But there's one little line in here that I find to be really fascinating. Jesus turns to Peter and he says, "On this rock I will build my church." He's not like pointing at a rock on the road at that point and saying, "On this very stone, I'm going to build the foundation of a cool church building of which I will be the pastor." I don't think that's what he's saying. I think he's saying, "Peter," which means rock, "I'm going to build my church on you, or I'm going to send you out to kickstart this thing. You're going to crank the flywheel, and you're going to be one of the key players in making this thing go." And in doing that, Jesus uses a word, ecclesia or ecclesia. It's a Greek word that means gathering of faith, gathering of religious people who are like-minded when it comes to religion or theology. That's what that word means, and Jesus only uses it a couple times. As obsessed as Christians are with church, Jesus only uses this word a couple times. It's always in the book of Matthew, and it doesn't give us a whole lot of idea of what this church is supposed to be, what it's supposed to look like. There's a whole lot in the epistles, the second half of the New Testament, written primarily by Paul, but a few others as well, about how the church should function, but it's really specific to that particular church context. In fact, a lot of the books are named after the church that letter is written to. And those were 2,000 years ago, and they were experiencing wildly different things than many of us are experiencing now. That doesn't make it irrelevant, but it also makes it hard to make an apples-to-apples comparison from New Testament church Christianity and 2020 church Christianity. And so we have a responsibility. We have a responsibility to figure out what it actually looks like to participate in a church, this ecclesia, this gathering of religious people. There's very little in the Bible that guides us on this. It's by no means silent on how to do church, if you will. But it is incredible to me how opinionated Christians are on what church should be like or what church should look like, right? You have opinions about what church should be like. You do. Everybody does. But in reality, we don't have a tremendous amount of biblical guidance on how that should actually play out. When I was in college, I took this anthropology class, okay? The professor was Dr. Richards, and I had no idea what anthropology was until I went into the classroom, okay? And it was like halfway through the first lecture that the professor explained it, and I was like possessed by it. I was like, this is amazing. I can't wait. I went right after that class, I went straight to the counselor or administrative person to change my major. I was like, this is the thing that I want to be. And then they said, you have to take extra classes. And I said, maybe not. I'm not sure I want to do that. But I was really close. I was like, this is going to be really good. I loved anthropology. I thought it was great. But there was one problem with this class. The professor absolutely loathed me. I know that's hard to believe. He couldn't stand me, and he was vocal and visible about this. He would mock my responses and comments in class. He was very harsh in grading my papers and indicated that he was maybe harsher with me than other students. He was visibly bothered when I would come into class or into his office. You can see why this would be a problem. Eventually, I went into his office one day. I just kind of, I didn't even schedule an appointment. I just showed up and I said, I need to know why you're so bothered by me. Like, I just need to understand this. So A, so I can pass this class. And B, I just need to clear the air. Like, what is going on? He went on to explain to me that it was because I was a Christian that he so distasted me and Christianity in general. It was because of my faith that he was so bothered by my presence and my participation in his class. I guess at some point I had indicated that I was a Christian, and he kind of took that to the bank. I asked him to explain why, because at that point I'm like, well, this isn't my fault anymore. Like, there's something else going on here, and I need to know what's happening. And he said, and he invited me to come back behind his desk where I could see his computer, and he pulled up a series of photos. These were black and white photos, and the photos were all of white missionaries in other countries, primarily in the Amazon, The men were dressed in suits. The women were dressed in dresses. And they were photos of these missionaries explaining to these people how to be Christians. But really what they were doing, and you could see it in the pictures, is how the missionaries were explaining how to be people, how to be civilized, how to be right, how to live correctly. The pictures were patronizing at least. But he went on to explain to me that there were some of these people who were exposed to this kind of mission work actually didn't live much past when those photos were taken because they decided to adopt an American or a European lifestyle and therefore were killed by their tribe. Or they decided to adopt this lifestyle and they weren't able to literally survive in the environment they were in because they were trying to speak a different language or eat different foods or wear different clothes. And he explained to me that his life's work was about understanding cultures, loving cultures for what they were, participating in cultures for what they were. And he said Christians, all they do is mess that up. And the crazy thing is, he wasn't wrong. See, I grew up being taught that Christianity meant being countercultural at every turn, being in a place and being among a people and saying, that is in and of itself inherently, because it's not Christian, is wrong, and I need to find a different way to do it. I was taught that, and I believed that. And 100 years ago, I probably would have been one of those missionaries. Conversion to me meant changing our entire life, doing something completely different, and everything looking so radically different from what it had before that it was unrecognizable. It takes me kind of back to this quote. John Tyson, the pastor up in New York, said this about the church. The early church leaders didn't have the things that we now consider essential for our faith. They didn't have official church buildings, vision statements, or core values. They had no social media, radio broadcasts, or celebrity pastors. They didn't even have the completed New Testament. Christ followers were often deeply misunderstood, persecuted, and some gave their lives for their faith, yet they loved and served, and they prayed, and they blessed, and slowly, over hundreds of years, they brought the empire to its knees. And they did it through love. They did it through love, not through dramatic coercion. They truly cared about the people around them. They didn't do it by fear-mongering, manipulating, or moralizing the surrounding culture. That's a very different ideology. That's a very different approach to doing church than what I grew up with and what many of you have experienced before. I do understand when we become Christians, when we are converted or we make that turn or change or throw a stick in the fire or whatever it is that we do, that it indicates a new creation in us. We become a new person, but that new person still stays in this same body, embedded in our same neighborhoods and in our same jobs. We put roots in the same soil that we did before. So although we may change, our context does not change. The story that I see throughout the Bible and throughout history over the last 2,000 years shows that Christianity in many ways learns about, loves, embraces, and takes responsibility for a culture and for a place. It doesn't reject the people and the culture around them. It embraces those things. Jesus had this way of stirring up and messing with the culture of the day while simultaneously affirming and acting within its bounds. He was constantly adding to, bolstering, fulfilling, improving cultural norms of the day. Yes, he was playing with a little bit of anarchy the entire time, but he was always kind of playing within those bounds. When he turned water into wine at the wedding of Cana, he played within the cultural rules of a wedding or celebratory gathering. He did not play by the rules of science in that particular situation, but he played by other cultural rules. He also broke, in the best way, the rules of when to bring out the best wine. He did that towards the end of the party. But in doing so, he was fulfilling and affirming the cultural norms of the day. He did this all throughout the book of John. He showed up to a variety of different festivals, the major Jewish festivals, in fact, and he participated in them as they were. He kind of messed with them and tweaked them and changed them and fulfilled them and bolstered them and affirmed them, but he did it all in his way. The way I see Jesus interact with culture makes me think that living out our faith in a community has as much to do with where we are as what we believe. There's this little mantra we have around our church that some of you will be familiar with. We often say that we want to help you join God in the work that he's already doing in the life that you're already living. The life that you're living is sacred. The job that you have is sacred. The home that you're in is sacred. The ground that you walk on, broken and weird, if it's anything like our sidewalks in Inglewood, is sacred. This place where this building actually is sitting right now is sacred. We don't have to make it sacred. It already is that. And our job, our hope, our call, our mission is to join God in that work that he's already doing, to join him in that. Right now in this room, there are 2 church plants. One that's just a little over a year old and one that's approaching 4 years old. Neither of these churches reinvented the wheel when we moved into these neighborhoods and started these churches. God was at work here in East Colfax before Joe and Kate showed up here. God was at work in North Aurora before the Sacred Grace East Colfax ever was even a thought in anyone's mind. The same is true for Inglewood. Before we started doing our work there a few years ago, God was already at work there, and we get the opportunity to join him in that work. And in doing so, we get to embrace the surrounding community and the surrounding culture. We simply join God in what he's already doing in the lives that we're already living. A parish church is one that takes spiritual and social responsibility for a specific geography. That's the easiest way to get at the answer to that question. And in doing so, we have to first listen and first learn. And slowly, over the course of years, if not decades, we begin to make changes. But these changes are the kinds of changes that are needed in that community. Yes, if there's a cultural norm in that community that is in stark contrast with following the way of Jesus, it's something that we can speak against or reject. But you'll find so often that in the places where you live, work, play, pray, shop, whatever it is, that there's so much good in that community. To be celebrated, to be loved, to be embraced, to be discovered. A parish church doesn't exist to rewire the culture and social norms of its neighborhood unless that is what the neighborhood wants or needs. A parish church exists to first learn, then care, and last to change when it's most appropriate. There's this little school a couple blocks from our building. It's called Bishop Elementary School. And it's become a really special place for our family and for our church. Well, half our kids go there. I was going to say all of them, not all of them yet. A lot of them go there. Many of you have been there for a variety of different things that we've done there. It's a special place. But it has a really interesting history, and it's kind of followed this weird trajectory along with our church. It was not long after we launched our church that we learned that the school board had passed a bond in the city of Inglewood to rebuild all of the elementary schools. It's only 4. It's not that big of a deal. But all 4 schools were going to be rebuilt. And in order to do so, they were considering moving Bishop Elementary School to a different location, out of the neighborhood that really feels like the epicenter of our parish in many ways. And we started, and there was a handful of us. When I say we, I mean 6 of us, started to read and pray and think and ask and learn and listen. What would be the impact of moving a school out of this neighborhood? What would happen if that took place? And we found that the neighbors didn't want it. We found out that it was not how the school system in Inglewood was designed to begin with. We found out that it would have a dramatic impact probably on a variety of things, not least of which would be crime and potentially safety in the community. There's a lot that a school does simply by being there. And then selfishly, I was like, I'd really like for my kids to walk to school, so I really want that to stay right where it is. And the handful of us that got excited about this or decided we were going to stick our nose in this business started showing up for town hall meetings. We started showing up for school board meetings. We started to write letters. We started to fill out surveys. We found out that you could fill out the survey multiple times and just, change your name. And so we started doing that, just tweaking words here and there. There was only a few of us, but we believed that keeping a school there was best for the neighborhood and therefore best for the mission of God in that community, embracing what that community already was and already had. And I'm excited to say that this is the new building that they decide to build in the exact same location, and it opened up in January. And we got to tour this school and see all the things that God did over the course of years leading up to that on a parallel track with the mission and vision of our church. Just a handful of us protesting and advocating and saying, don't do that, do this, we believe this is best, and we do think that it aligns with the mission of God. It's not expressly or explicitly Christian. But the amount of trust that we have built with that school as a result is incredible. The number of times I've had the opportunity to pray with, intercede for, care for teachers in that school, families in that school, The things that we get to do alongside that school are tremendous. And it's, I think, because a group of us said, we're going to fight for what's right in this place. We're going to speak truth to power, and we're going to see this place stay. We're going to preserve something. Sometimes being a part of a parish church is about progress, and sometimes it's about preservation. But it's never about colonizing. It's never about rejecting everything and trying to create a new way of life. It's about inviting regularity of the culture around us into a spiritual context or vice versa. It's about integration. It's about following the way of Jesus together. Kids just walked through. It's about being in a place, for a place, with a place. I want to emphasize here that when I talk about Parish, I obviously have a lot to say, and I get really excited about it. It's not the way forward. It is a way forward. I think it's an important way forward, and I think over the next 10 years, you are going to see this grow as a movement across the United States. More and more churches and more Christians saying, instead of driving to that one place way over there and parking in a big parking lot and walking across that parking lot and being, instead of doing all that, I kind of just want to be in a place where I know I'm going to run into the people that I see on Sunday, on Monday, and on Thursday, and maybe again on the weekend. I think you're going to see this grow more and more. It's not the way, but it is a way. I really want our churches to be on mission to care for and take responsibility for the neighborhoods that we call home. That's my hope, is that we follow the way of Jesus together in that particular methodology. Bonus, it's way different than the way our parents did it. Probably for anybody in the room, because it just feels different, and it is different in so many ways. I can't remember who said it, but there was a professor at Denver Seminary that told me, or that provided a great metric for missional success for your church. He said, if you were to move out of that neighborhood overnight, would you be missed? Would anybody even notice you were gone? And that in so many ways has been in the back of my mind as we've continued to put roots down in Inglewood. I know it's been on Joe's mind as he's continued to put roots down here in North Aurora, saying, if we were to disappear overnight, would anybody even really notice? That's a great metric for missional success. We believe in and continue to pursue an integrated life where faith and our jobs and our neighborhoods and our hobbies and relationships meet and overlap. That is the reality of a parish church environment. And my hope is that you'll dig in. Whichever church, whichever parish you find yourself a part of, my hope is that you'll dig into that thing. You'll find a way to care for that place, even if it's not the place where you live or where your kids go to school or where you have a job. Even if it's just the church you've been attached to, that place is sacred. And all the other places where you interact, live, work, and play, those are sacred as well. And this is the call on our lives as the Sacred Grace, but I do think it's our call on our lives as Christians as we follow the way of Jesus together. People rearrange their lives around jobs and schools and safety and affordability all the time. It's about time we consider rearranging our lives around a spiritual community, don't you think? It's about time we started thinking, what does it mean to rearrange my life around this thing that means so much to me and my growth and my development? It'd be interesting to consider that instead of all the other things that we tend to rearrange our lives around. Would you pray with me? Heavenly Father, thanks for an opportunity to be here in East Colfax. Thank you for all the ways that East Colfax has continued to be established. Thank you for all the ways that it continues to grow. Thank you that through thick and thin that Joe and Kate and Ruben and Kayla and many others have been committed to the mission and vision of East Colfax here. We pray, God, that you would continue to strengthen and bring health to our family of churches. And that we would continue to follow the way of Jesus together in the places where we live and work, play, the places where we're putting down roots. We love you, and we pray these things in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.